We know how to set up trig ratios and we know how to solve for missing sides. Now let's talk about how to solve for the missing angles in a triangle. So, again, recall the trig ratios. Sine of angle A is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine of angle A is adjacent over hypotenuse. And tangent of angle A is opposite over adjacent. Okay? Similarly, like we did in the last video, let's set up three equations and let's figure out if we have any unknowns. So it says find the missing angle. We're going to call angle A x because we don't know it, okay? And we're going to set up sine of angle A. So sine of x equals, we need the opposite and the hypotenuse. Now I don't know the hypotenuse either, so I'm going to label that y. So opposite is 10. Hypotenuse is y. Cosine of angle A, that's cosine of x equals adjacent over hypotenuse. That's 18 over y. And then tangent of angle A, that's tangent of x, which is opposite over adjacent, so that's 10 over 18. And now let's look at this. It says, which of these equations can you solve? Which means, again, like we talked about yesterday, in which of these equations is there only one variable? And notice the angle is actually unknown. The angle is a variable here. So I have one variable here and a second variable y here. I can't solve the sine equation. Cosine, I have one variable here and another variable here. I can't use the cosine equation. However, tangent, I have my angle as a variable, but I know my trig ratio. So that's actually the equation that I can solve. Tangent of angle x is going to equal 10 over 18, which we're solving for the angle here. This is different than what we have done in past classes, okay? So let's look at some examples here. We're going to start these the exact same way as we started solving the missing side. So we're going to identify our givens first. I know I'm looking for this angle x. I'm given the opposite side and I'm given the hypotenuse. And so I'm going to ask myself, okay, sine, well, let's write SOHCAHTOA. That might help some of you a little bit more. SOHCAHTOA. And which trig ratio, sine, cosine, or tangent, involves the opposite and the hypotenuse? That would be sine. So we're going to set up an equation just like we did before. Sine of the angle is x equals opposite is 12 over the hypotenuse is 13. So in the last topic, we would solve these equations by multiplying and kind of using some algebra. However, this x is stuck inside my sine function. So we're going to introduce something new. I'm going to introduce you to the inverse trig function. So my inverse trig functions are sine inverse, cosine inverse, there's like a little -1, and tangent inverse. Okay? You should see those on the calculator actually right above the sine, cosine, and tangent buttons, but you have to hit second first. So now when we use these inverse functions, I want to think about what should go inside. Okay? Inverse means I'm going to undo what the trig function is actually doing. I know that's kind of a new topic that we haven't really figured out, or that we haven't really talked about yet. Okay? So what's different is when I use the trig function, if this is sine, I want to use sine inverse. And I'm actually going to flip the angle and the ratio. So now the ratio is going to go inside here. So it's going to be sine inverse of 12 over 13 equals x. These two kind of flip-flop, okay? We call that inputs and outputs that are switching, and you'll learn more about that in Algebra 2, okay? And now I can actually just use my calculator. I can say sine inverse, that's second, sine, and I'm going to write 12 divided by 13, and I'm going to get 67.38, and that's my angle x. Okay? Let's do another example just so that we can kind of solidify this a little bit more. So the angle is angle A, okay? That's what's given. I'm given the adjacent side and the hypotenuse. All right? So that is, now let's look at SOHCAHTOA. SOHCAHTOA. Adjacent and hypotenuse, I think that is cosine, right? So let's set up our equation. Cosine of A equals adjacent over hypotenuse. That's 15 over 23. That angle A is stuck inside my cosine function, which means I need an inverse function so I can flip-flop these two. So cosine inverse of 15 over 23 equals A. Okay? And now I use my calculator. Cosine inverse of 15 divided by 23 is 49.29. See if you can get that on your own on the calculator. 49.29. And that's my angle. Okay? So what's important to write down is that the inverse functions are used to find angles. All right? So when you guys see a problem, you have to actually kind of just realize, am I solving for the side here or am I solving for the angle? Do I want to use a regular trig function or the inverse trig function? Also, if you would like to do this on your phone, I believe you can also hit second. So again, your phone should be like turned sideways so that you have the more calculator options. Let's do number 1. You would want to hit first 12 divided by 13. You want to do the inside first. Hit equals, and then you want to hit the second button, which is like up on the left underneath the parentheses, and there should be a little like sine inverse button, and you can click that and you will get your answer. Okay, so the phone was a little bit trickier than the calculator. The order kind of switches, and that'll be the same for every trig function. You do the inside first, hit second, and then you can hit the inverse trig function. Okay? Good luck on your homework, and I hope you have a lovely evening.